Hey everyone, it's Nicole Snow. I'm the owner over at darngoodyarn.com, and today I have Mary Ballard with me for our Wind Down Wednesday. And it might not even be Wednesday when you're listening to this, and I don't actually have wine today, so this is a very funny start to our show. But Mary has an awesome business, and I'm so excited that she's on our show today. So she owns Goldfinch Woven, and I've actually purchased things from her in the past. I think I have three or four necklaces. I think I have three necklaces from you.
Yeah.
I think are like, they're so beautiful and people are always want to touch them, and it's kind of
Oh,
cool. And I'm like, please don't touch my boobies. But they're so cool. And I really love your stuff. I mean, you make large form, woven products as well. And I want to like really dive into that. Because in the past we've had knitters and crocheters on the show, and you're our first weaver. So
aw, thanks.
yay. But I'm really excited to hear everything, like all about what you're doing, because the work that you make, I mean, it's truly fine art. And I love that I could tell that you really have your business game down, because you have these large format pieces that I think people are more like used to seeing, like scarves and things like that. And then I love the fact that you were smart enough to just make these small pieces of jewelry so you can still integrate that fiber art into your outfit.
Yeah.
But for you as an entrepreneur, I'm thinking it's not taking as long, and I bet your margins are pretty great on them, which is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit more affordable. It's like the beginning piece. Like you start small and then work your way up.
Yeah, I think that's I love, and I knew exactly what you were doing. But I always, when I work with independent artists, I'm like, hey, like, I know you want to sell this 200 or 300 or $1,000 piece, but like,
Right.
someone who just wants to get to know you, you have to give them like a little sampler. Like you have to give them an appetizer before you give them the full steak meal, right?
Right.
So yeah, I love it, and I think the pieces are beautiful. Like, so if you're not familiar, well, I'm gonna tell everyone that they need to follow you on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
No, they need to, because whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, she's at it again. And you take such beautiful, rich photos, and the angles on them, and they're clear, and they're so rich and lush. Like you can feel the texture through your phone. So I love that.
You can talk to me every day. This is the greatest ego boost I've had.
No, I'm not just saying that either. Like it's funny because I like to usually buy things from people that we work with, but like under just like my name, and sometimes they don't even know it's me. And then they're like, oh, you own my stuff. Like, oh, it's cool. So Mary, tell me a little bit about let's just start from the top. Like, tell me about your craft experience, how you got into the fiber art world, and a little bit of like what's going on right now.
Well, I actually, way back in a time called the 90s, I set out to be a fine artist. So I went to CCS here in Detroit, and I actually was going to be a painter. So I focused in painting and printmaking. And then, life kind of took a couple turns, and I actually ended up working in the fashion industry for about 10 years. And then, just that need to create something, because I didn't have a studio space. And so I picked up knitting needles and yarn and started knitting. And that kind of turned into like a little side business with making some stuff. And that turned into felting. And then I actually had a little business where I was making a bunch of kids stuff. So I was like felting like little gnomes and things like that.
Cool.
I'm doing okay with that when my firstborn was kind of young. And I ended up being a stay-at-home parent because of the recession, because the advertising industry just tanked. And so there wasn't a job for me to go back to. So I was at home and making stuff. And then after my second daughter was born, it was kind of like, well, do I go back to work, or do I try to make something really happen? And I just wasn't feeling the kids stuff anymore. I wanted to try something new. And so I started weaving because it was something I always wanted to do, but I was too intimidated by it, because like it just looked like there were a zillion strings on the looms and all these petals. And I was like, well, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to have a chance to do it. So I kind of forced myself to buy a rigid huddle loom and start small and kind of work my way up. And now it's like I have 3 or 4 looms in my studio and I want more. And it's just been a journey of just, well, I guess this is where I'm at, and we're going to see what happens and see where we can take it.
That's cool. So you have 3 looms. How big is your studio?
It's actually just a spare bedroom, like in our house. So there's also like, we have a futon and an elliptical machine over there. And so I have like half the room to myself, and I'm trying to squeeze everything in here right now. And it's very cramped.
Now you said it's a mess right now, right before we hopped on.
Yeah.
'Cause you're getting ready for a show this weekend, right?
Yeah, it's the first show of the holiday season, and it's actually my first show I've done as a weaver. And so it's kind of
Okay.
starting from scratch and, getting my booth ready and making sure I have enough, because it's kind of like, what do? I don't know what people are going to want in person.
Yeah.
Because I've done some retail stuff before, but it's different when it's in a store setting, as opposed to like you're here for 6 hours and people are coming and buying directly from you and touching everything and asking you questions. And
Put some
yeah.
Purell out in the front so everyone can keep their hands clean before they touch everything.
Right, I know. It's cold and flu season. Everything's going to be wiped down with alcohol.
Yeah, just like anything that's sticky. I remember like when I used to do shows and I'm like, and you would see people come in and they were just eating popcorn or something. You're like, oh man. So you have I have a lot of questions that I think our viewers would really be interested in. I know we have a couple of makers that follow us. So my first is, so you sell in shops right now primarily, right?
Yeah, I have an Etsy store, but I'm really bad at updating it. And I just, I like the idea of Etsy, but it can be really tough unless you invest a lot of time
Mm-hmm.
and money and tags and everything like that to really get the followers that are there. So I've had really good success with a couple of retail shops. That, it's nice because it's such a tactile thing where it's like you don't want to buy like a $100 scarf, $200 scarf online when you don't know what it feels like
Right.
on your skin. And so I think giving people the opportunity to go in and touch stuff and see stuff and try it on, because you can't be everywhere all the time. It's a really nice opportunity, and I like that. Yeah. So there's a couple stockists in the Detroit area.
So how did you so what I love about this is that this is like old school business, not in a bad way. I think people think immediately like, I'm going to be a maker, I need to be on Etsy, I need to be on all of these platforms. And we were talking about before we started, this idea of self-promotion.
Right.
And it can be daunting on Etsy. Like I used to sell on Etsy too, and I understand like there's a huge time commitment, and
you can't make anything if you're going to be posting individual listings. Yeah,
exactly. And I do agree with you, and I love that you were like, okay, I'm going to go and hit up some shops and get into some shops, and in a way that helped you just sort of say, okay, it sounds like you were able to offload your inventory in a meaningful channel. Like I think
mm-hmm.
you figured that out, that you have a higher price point item, right? And you can have that that outlet. Tell me, because I think that, again, like I said, like people say automatically, okay, I'm going to go to Etsy or eBay, or maybe not eBay, but Etsy at least to go sell. What's sort of the old school way to do it? Like, how did you make those first contacts? And then I think the other thing that we get a lot of questions about is, how did you figure out your pricing for wholesale so that you're still making, your margin so that you can continue on with your business? Because you've been doing this for quite a while.
For about 3 years, and I've been selling steadily for probably the last 2. Pricing is always tricky because it's not, weaving isn't something that it's like, you can get through really quickly. It takes like a whole day to dress the loom, and then, there's weaving it in the process and the material. So it's not cheap. There's not like, a lot of room for overhead with it. So it's hard. I mean, it's a fine balance. I think that's the one thing that's really good about working with retailers, is that because they're there and they know their customers, and they have a better idea of kind of what your stuff is worth, and you're able to kind of change it. If it's not priced high enough, then you can kind of fluctuate in between and get some feedback from them. The formula is supposed to be like, is it like 2 times cost plus time or something? It's so fuzzy. I think as long as I'm making money back with a little bit to go in so I can reinvest in the business, that's kind of what I stick to. I mean, I think some of my stuff should be priced a lot more than it is, but at the same time, people aren't going to buy it, because it's pretty rare you're going to have someone who really appreciates fiber arts that's going to come in and be like, yes, here's all this money for this scarf. And you need to have things that are obtainable. I mean, it's not Walmart prices, it's not Target prices, because there is a handicraft to it, and there's a lot of time that goes into it. So it's a fine balance, but working with retailers has really helped. Because
do you, and I don't mean to cut you off, but like, do you have a conversation with the with the store owner? Like I'm really interested to know, like, how did you make maybe your initial connection?
Actually
But
through
I think
Instagram.
it's gutsy,
Yeah.
right? Like, like you have a little bit of the background from like your earlier days, like after college, it sounds like, with the fashion industry.
Mhm.
But I personally would be like intimidated to make an appointment with a store owner.
Yeah. Well, it's
Like,
because I've gone into a couple and they're like, this isn't priced high enough. Like, you need to price it more. And I was like, I don't know what to do because you don't want to drive people away. And then I don't know. I find the retailers that I've talked to, most of them I have met through Instagram, which is really great.
cool.
It's a great visual platform. You don't have to really put in a lot of things. People can see it. They can see the work. They can see the process. I think it's easier for people to understand the work that goes into it as opposed to just seeing pictures of the finished product.
Mhm.
Which I think gives a little bit more of a value to what you do to your handicraft. But yeah, it's a combination of materials and then the market that you're into and who's your target audience. So it's definitely, it's a process, and it's not something that you wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to price this for $25 and that's what it's worth. Things can start out at 25 and then go up to 50 and then go back down to 40.
Yeah.
It's kind of seeing where you're at the time in the market and who's buying it, like
Yeah.
who's interested in the item.
I think that's a really valuable point. I remember like having a similar story when I first started out. I mean, even cost change as well. Like, we're doing more with like importing, so we're dealing with like taxes changing and tariffs changing. But you start out at one price, and then as you get into it, you're like, oh wait, I have this taxes thing to pay for. Oh, I have employees. You have these other overheads that need to go into what the actual price of the product is. So there's all this value add that goes into it, and you have to be like kind of nimble and allow for that change and not be so rigid with it. Yeah. With your, so we were talking a little bit, like I said, before we hopped on live here, about self-promoting. So you do Instagram, right? And you proclaimed to me that you're like the, not the self-promoter.
Oh, no, I can't. No, I can't talk about myself. I can't sell myself at all.
So I think this is, to me, is really interesting because we have almost all women here as well, like at Darn Good Yarn. And I struggle with it as well. Do you think this is like a women's issue? Do you think this is a Mary issue? What do you think up
Might
with
be
that?
a little bit of both. No, I've always been kind of like the shy introvert type kind of kid. And it's like the one thing I liked about, studying fine art was that everything was objective. And like, you'd have a critique and you put it up and people would basically tell you what they thought of it. And it's like, they nitpick and you'd have to defend your choices, but you didn't go up and be like, oh, look at this painting that I made, or look at this print that I made. And, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it great? Don't you want to buy it? It's kind of like, here it is. And it's hard for me to put myself up and be like, this is great. This is really good, because I'm expecting, I don't know, maybe I've been trained just to like expect that criticism and that nitpicking for everything. And when I've contacted people about like, hey, do you want to like put my stuff in your store? It's like, do you like it? Do you think I'd be a good fit? I've never been that assertive when it comes to my own stuff. And I don't know if it's just, artists are their own worst critics, which might be part of it too. But I do think, and I think, having two daughters myself, it's like, we're starting to like, I'm trying to, train them to break out of it, and it works with them. And so sometimes like I have to take the own advice that I'm giving the kids and be like, hey, I'm awesome. Like, I'm really good. And some days I'm on a roll with it. And other days I'm like, nobody likes anything. Why am I doing this? Like, I should just go get a job and sell everything off.
You're not alone. I had a moment this morning. I was like, I'm just going to go get a tiny house, and I think I'm done.
Right. I'm going off the grid.
But I think it's like, and I have a daughter as well. So, and I think about like lessons that I want her to learn or not learn from me. And this idea of censorship, I think the self-promoting, I don't know I don't want to just, say, okay, this is just a women's issue, but I think we're taught to like, okay, make nice, we don't rock the boat. And that is, especially as an artist, and I'm almost like I'm one off. I'm like a one-off artist because I feel like I'm supplying the supply, right? But I still have to put some of like my artistic acumen into the actual design and what's coming out, like in terms of the yarn to provide to everyone. And you get into this place of going like, okay, these are all the reasons why we can't sell this yarn because this, this. And my one thing that's always come back and I've been taught is that when I stripped off that censorship and I said, you know what, let's just put it out there and test it and let the market decide, the results have always been much more interesting. And so very surprising to me, you know? Was there ever a time where do you think that it's held you back, like that censorship and that not wanting to self-promote held you back?
Yeah, I think there's probably been like some opportunities, you know, where I've been like, oh, I'm not good enough to like maybe apply for this show or to enter something into this, you know, textile show or something like that, because, you know, it's really easy, especially, you know, one of the drawbacks of the social medias right now is that you have all these other people that you can visually compare yourself to constantly. And it can be pretty overwhelming. And it's like, you know, you kind of just got to do you. Like, this is what you're doing, and this is what you do good, and this is what you like to do. And you just got to kind of own it and take it. I think it's like, we have like a little plaque in our house. Like, it's like an Abraham Lincoln quote that's like, whatever you are, be a good one. And so like, that's what it's like, okay, well, this is who I am. So I'm going to be a good one. Like, this is what I do. And, you know, you do have to own it and, you know, put it out there. You just got to rip it off and do it.
It's hard. I think though, you know, we were talking about this in one of my last shows. It's like, it's sort of like this muscle. Like, I think there are these uncomfortable things, and being an entrepreneur and owning your own business, like that uncomfortable self-promotion thing, it sucks the first 25 times you do it, but it's a muscle. Like, I think that there are these muscles that self-promoting, I think, is a muscle that I think we can all, you know, as women especially, and being in that entrepreneur seat, because you're generally by yourself, right? Most of the time, and you're sort of navigating on your own. You have to say, okay, I'm going to break out of this and not censor and just see what happens.
Right.
But you know, I want to share something. I was listening to a book last night. I was in the car for a while, and it was talking about, it's this book called Traction. So it's a business growth book, because I'm a nerd and that's what I do with my time. I listen to business books driving up the Northway in here in New York. But one of the quotes was, it was around this idea where you have the sun, right? And it produces, I don't know, megawatts. I know I'm using the wrong term, but all this energy, right? So if you stand out in the sun, you stand there, you'll get a little sunburn, right? And it's all these watts of energy and you get a little sunburn. But if you were to take a couple of those watts and direct it into one little small spot and focus again, like on you, like you're talking about you doing you, but focus it on that one small thing with laser focus. That's what a laser runs off of. It's just a couple watts of energy.
Right.
So you think about that contrast where you try to be everything to everyone, and all you get is a little sunburn. But if you can
do it,
focus, right? You can cut through things, you can cut through diamonds, you know, and I was like, man, that's a very powerful, you know, visual analogy to me, that, you know, the Instagrams are great. And yeah, I think we all like to be on social media and see whatever and make connections, but there's a time to almost, okay, shut it off and get back to doing you, because that's what, as an artist, that's what makes you so unique, and that's how you offer your gifts to the world.
No, you don't want to go around, you know, imitating everyone else. You got to kind of find your group and see what you do, and you have to be patient with yourself. Like, I think it's really easy. I think especially as a working mom, you probably get it too. It's like you have all these ideas of things that you're going to do, and here's my to-do list, and here's what I'm going to accomplish, and this is my short-term goal, and this is my long-term goal. And then
I have a notebook somewhere here,
right, like,
here it is.
And my phone is just full of lists and lists and lists. Like, there's like 50 lists, and I'm just like, what is this? Why did I write this down? Like, because it's something that I'm never going to be able to accomplish right now. And you can kind of file it away. Like, well, maybe one day I'll try writing that pattern book, or maybe one day I'll, you know, apply for this big show, or one day I'll do something like this. But right now I just have to, you know, if my kid gets sick, that's going to throw everything off for a while. Or if, you know, life happens, and like, you know, kids have a way of, you know, jumping in when you think you hit a groove and being like, guess what? Like, you can't do everything you thought you could do. And sometimes I can honestly find myself being a little resentful that it's like, I don't get to have, these crazy weeks where I'm just in the studio making all the stuff. It's like, oh, I have to go and do the dishes, or I have to go fold laundry, or I have to go pick the kids up from school when I've really hit a good groove on something. But at the same time, that's why I'm able to do this. And that's how I'm here. Like if I didn't have my kids and have that time at home to really think about what I wanted to do and be as an artist, I wouldn't be where I am now. So it's just, it's a weird, serendipitous, path that's brought me here.
So I'm going to I'll call you for your pep talk and self-promotion. You have to call me on what you just talked about, because I feel like I deal with that all the time now, where it's, I love my daughter, right?
Oh yeah.
The old Nicole was like, 16 hours of working a day, like that was my happy place. And now it's like, all right, I have 30 minutes and go. Like, right. And then that's all I have for the rest of
because you want to be able to get all this stuff done in your mind. I think it was a few years ago, I think the New York Times, I want to say, had this really great essay that someone wrote about can moms be great artists? And I'm totally paraphrasing here, but it was really good because it's really hard to switch back and forth. Because I think a lot of people with the creative mind, it's like when you are in the zone, like you hyper focus.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to break out. And, after having kids for 2 years after each of my daughters were born, it's like it was hyper focused mom. And then you step out one day and you're like, who am I? Like, where do I belong? And so, but then you really get into like the artist mode. Like right now, like, everything in my studio is a mess and there's just yarn everywhere. And all I want to do is finish making this stuff up for, these events I have coming up. And it's really hard to snap back into that mom mode and be like, oh, okay, like, let's pack you a nutritious lunch and, make sure that, your shoes are clean and your fingernails are clipped, because right now it's like I'm hyper focused on all of this. So it is really hard to find that, like, there's no balance. Like, it's so funny. People are like, how do you find balance? You don't find balance. You can't. It's just like swing a pendulum from one side to the other, and it's great extremes all the time.
Yeah. I completely, like, I'm totally on Team Mary right now, because I feel like I'm the same way. Like the elasticity of the mind that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. God, if we can bottle that up, right. Motivational speakers we'd be.
Oh yeah.
Because it is. I think that it's there isn't balance. Like, how old are your children?
They are 10 and 6. So they're older now, but it's like they get more independent, but then there's more stuff that comes in too.
Yeah.
So, there's extracurricular activities, and you have the social things you have to deal with, and, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if there really is a balance, is there?
There's not.
Are there any hacks? Like, are there any hacks that so, you're talking about making lists. Like I make a ton of lists, and I actually just cleaned up my desk today. I'm like, okay, these are all my goals, and try to segment that. Any hacks that you found that get you into your studio just a little bit longer?
Gosh, no. Well, I mean, I guess it's easier if you put the phone down. Like, I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with nowadays, is you got to like put down the phone, like get off Facebook and, all that stuff, and like really concentrate on like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And I'm going to, get the housework done so I can do this. Cause that's one of the hard things about being a home-based person. When you're working at a home, you can't really leave everything behind. It's like, you're not going off to work. So people have expectations when they come home about like, well, why isn't this picked up and why isn't this done?
I'm going to correct you. You can do that. It's called shutting the door. You don't have to look at it all day.
So yeah, it's hard to do, but and then you do have to draw boundaries for yourself too, which can, I think, be really hard too. I think when you're talking about being assertive enough to promote yourself, being assertive enough to protect that space around you and what you need to do in your creative space, instead of taking all of that work and that load on, I think realizing like you can do this on your own, or this can wait, and really prioritizing stuff, and just, it's a lot easier said than done, but just letting all the noise go away. Because I think, especially as women and mothers, it's easy for a lot of that noise to get stuck to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, you talk about like a clean house, and, you didn't quite say it, but like it's sort of the gender roles and stuff like that. And I remember I just recently, my husband's watching, but having this conversation with him though, like, I understand, like your mom did an awesome job, and I'm not gonna sit here and try to compete with your mom, because she was like a superwoman. but
Right.
I'm like not that person. And,
Right.
and so this idea of reestablishing, um, expectations and creating some agreements around, okay, I know you want the kitchen clean, you can do that. Like, because I
Right.
need to just have that extra time so I can focus on this, and establishing that boundary and kind of lowering, I don't want to say not living in a pigsty, but lowering just the tight, like the cleanliness expectations.
Right.
I think we sometimes hold ourselves up to this, like, oh, everything has to be folded. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not going to be folded. No, it's not.
um, so when you look at shows, again, I think like our listeners would be interested in this. So you found like wholesale venues, which I think is super cool because, the amount of time it takes to go do a show is,
Mhm.
it's a lot. You're going through like the hustle right now. And I appreciate you
Right.
taking like a precious like hour with me, half hour with me, and sharing your story with us. But how do you vet shows that you do wind up going to? What's your process?
Well, I'm lucky enough. I have, a group of friends that are makers around here, and Detroit has a really awesome like indie craft scene.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of events that have been going on for a while, from big to small. It's a lot through like word of mouth, and having kids at home, like I can't do like the big shows that are like 3 days in a
Yeah.
row, and I think having something that's not as easy to mass produce, like nothing I make is mass produced, everything's one of a kind. I can't build up a ton of inventory easily and
Mhm.
have all this stuff ready to go for something like that. So it has to be something where I have to think about, what's the draw for the show? Like, what kind of people is it going to be, like the young hipsters? Is it going to be like the older established, well-to-do women? Is it going to be kind of like a general, bit of everything, or is it going to be something that's a little bit more artistic? What's the demographic that I'm going for? What's the price point that's going to work for that
Mhm.
crowd, and what's the commitment going to be, and also what's the application fee and the booth fee,
Yeah.
because that can be really hard when you're first starting out to do this stuff. Like, can you afford to spend $500 on a booth fee if you don't know if people are going to buy your stuff?
Yep.
So it's right now I've picked a couple good ones that are just one day here or there, because I love my husband and he needs his downtime too. And so to be like, hey, you're going to have the kids for 3 days in a row while I go off and do this stuff, that's really hard to balance right
Yeah.
now. In a few years when the kids are older, that might work, but right now it's going to be, one day here, one day there, with some time in between so I can vacuum and do all that
Yeah.
other mom stuff that I'm supposed to
But I
do.
think I think it's great though that you realized that and said, okay, this is like how much energy I have, and then I'm going to just find these ways and make it work
Mhm.
and wriggle around that. I think you're being realistic with yourself. But the thing that the thing that I'm hearing too is that you have figured out other sales channels though to backfill into, potential revenue streams, which is
Yeah.
actually, it's decreased your risk. So if you were
Mhm.
just sitting here saying, okay, I've carved out time for these 3 days, and then you could potentially only just focus on those 3 day shows, right?
Right.
Then you would leave off the wholesale accounts that you've been able
Right.
to set up. As a business person, I would say like you kind of have the best of both worlds going on
Mhm.
because you potentially have, you've smoothed out some of your sales cycle as well,
Right.
because you're getting stuff into shops year round, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's nice to have that trickle of income coming in.
Yeah.
Because the Etsy orders can be far. Like I said, I'm really bad at putting stuff up on Etsy. I've started to build my own website, but then I stopped because other stuff comes in. So it's hard. It's hard to do that, and it's like, as a small business owner, when it's just one person making something, you can't afford a marketing team to
No.
like go off and get all this stuff for you, because that's a lot. And I have some great friends who work in advertising and have helped me with logos, or my sister-in-law works in marketing and I'll bounce ideas off of her, but I can't afford to pay them to do this stuff for me. That'd be great, but then I'd also have to keep up with the work and the demand that was, and it's just me. I'm one person,
Yeah.
and there's only so much I can do. So yeah, it is. You do have to be realistic, or otherwise you're just going to kill yourself, trying to meet all these expectations and deadlines, and it's really, really hard to do. But yeah, you have to be honest.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the person who signs up for all this stuff and then drops out because you're like, oh, I don't have anything.
That's me. I'm just learning now how to say no to things.
Right. It's very important to learn how to say no. Like, I think that's the best thing you can do is just be like, no, that's not going to work for me. Because I think it's really easy to be like, oh, well, I should do this, or I need to do this, and try to live up to all these commitments. And it's like, well, if I don't want to do that and I'm not going to have fun and it's going to stress me out, I'm not going to do it.
Right. Right.
There's good stress, and then there's the bad stress. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're going to wrap things up in the next like 6 minutes or so. You have some things behind you. I think, for people who are watching, maybe not listening, I would love it if you showed some folks who are not familiar with what you make, just maybe one of the things you're working on, if you want to describe it. And we'd love to hear how and where you get your inspirations from. Yeah.
Oh, these are all fun stories. Well, let's see. Okay, I'm going to pull. So this is recycled silk from Darn Good Yarn. Woo! Wow.
I swear, everyone, that was not product placement. You didn't even know I was going to really ask you to do this.
No, I was just trying to make it look kind of nice in the back so it wasn't chaos like it was earlier this morning. No, actually, that's how I got in touch with you guys to begin with and started making patterns and stuff for you, is because I was using a lot of your yarn, I think, in kind of unusual ways, because a lot of people I don't think weave with recycled sari silk, which they should, because it's awesome. But I love the stuff. I love the stuff. I'm always so excited, to get packages from you guys or to work with you guys, because it's like, oh, there's more stuff from you, and the colors are great and the textures are great. But it's recycled sari silk and organic cotton, and it's a little unusual because the sari silk is the warp, which is pretty hard to work with. Because it's got knots and it's very thick and bulky. But this is a nice little scarf that we have that. But the texture and the colors in it, I just love it. And I started making these because I had a friend who wanted a scarf, but she's like, I'm allergic to wool, and I don't want to wear silk, so it needs to be something that looks really cool and is artistic, but I can't get a rash from it. So that's how I started working with sari silk.
Cool.
And it's just kind of been a cool thing from there. Let's see what else. And then I have. This is another one. It's organic cotton and some Noro yarn.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, these are always really popular. I love this. It's so airy, and I feel like a mermaid, when you wear it. And this is all stuff that still needs to be trimmed up, but
it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
So how long does something like that take you to make?
It depends. There are ways. If you can do a really long warp, and get it all in the loom at once, and make a couple scarves or 5 or something out of that, that saves a lot of time, because if you're working on a big floor loom, just the process of getting everything on to the loom can take forever. With something like a rigid heddle loom where you can direct warp it, it's in a half hour you can be ready to go, depending on how fast you're working. Cool. So with the floor loom, it can take a whole day sometimes to get it prepped. But once you're going, then as long as you can just keep weaving, you can weave a couple things in a day.
Cool.
So it depends. And the materials, because I like to experiment a little bit more with materials. Some of them can be pretty temperamental. And my ideas are really great, but once you try to put them into practice, everything can kind of rip apart and fall apart. But seeing how it goes and experimenting can work, and it can also be me shooting myself in the foot.
If someone wanted to get their feet wet in the world of weaving, just to sort of try out, and we're approaching the holidays, so maybe they could tell someone to go buy stuff for them.
Yeah.
What would be a nice little entry level, super basic loom, and way to sort of enter in, just to sort of try it out?
I think that the best thing that I could say is to look at rigid heddle looms.
Okay.
They're very basic, they're very simple, they're very easy to use, but it's something that as you go along, they can be very versatile. So if you try to get a floor loom where you have 6 treadles and all these, harnesses and ties, that's just going to be overwhelming, I think. But rigid heddle looms are really easy because you can just make that simple scarf. You can make that simple plain cloth. You can do the smaller projects like necklaces or bookmarks, something like that. But then you can also play on that and add to it once you feel comfortable and start doing some of the more intricate patterns. And
cool.
It's kind of a starter from there. And then get a couple good books. Libraries are awesome.
Right.
Weaving books can be really expensive and they add up. Check out all the books you can and see what ones resonate with you and aren't intimidating, and just kind of go from there.
And then follow you on Instagram for inspiration.
And follow me on Instagram.
No, like it's not. It's like for real, everyone. Like I have watched your stuff, and I'm like, okay, I am going to weave with the spare
You
time
should
I have,
weave.
but, like,
You should.
it's only
Everyone should weave.
following you on Instagram, though. That's great. And like in terms of like inspiration, like, so are you looking to other designers? Are you just sort of like pulling from, like, where are you sort of pulling your inspiration from to create?
Well, a lot of it is, if you see something, you're like, oh, well, that's really cool, but it's not, oh, that's really cool, I'm gonna make that. It's like, how can I take that concept and kind of make it my own? So, I don't, because it's like they're already making it. Like, why would I want to do the same thing?
Yeah.
Like, why would I want to spend my time and not put myself into something? So a lot of it is, like, I like this color and I'm going to see how this works together. A lot of it is, I'm very texture driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it is just, well, how is this going to look if I add that in, or if I put this material in with that one? And it's much more of a process for me, because I've always been very much of a process person. I don't set out with, this is what the final project is going to look like. It's not going to follow this exact pattern. That's really rare for me. So it's kind of an experiment to see what works, and what's the what's the stuff that I'm actually getting good feedback, and what's selling, because it's like I'll have to make the money stuff to afford to buy the yarn so I can make more. But then you want to do stuff that's just on your own too. And a lot of time working with retailers too is really great, because they're like, hey, we like this that you're doing here, but maybe you could put this different spin on it, or maybe instead of having just a bracelet, you can make it a necklace too, or maybe you could try doing this in a different format. And you get the ideas and the little seeds that grow, and before you know it, it's a whole new thing that people are really clicking into.
Yeah, that was like us with our yarn subscription. It was just this one weird little seed, and it's just turned into this whole, some significant part of our business that we have, and we're able to just reach out to a huge community. But like, you never know, right, where that next little idea, what that next seed could like blossom into.
Yeah, well, it's great. No, because it's like a little Instagram post like connected me with you guys, and it's been like one of the best relationships. Like, I love working with you guys.
Thank you.
When I get an email or something to do a pattern or something like that, and it's been wonderful. So it's you never know where the next thing's gonna come from.
Yeah, it's true. I always like to wrap up every show with this. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Oh, well, I think something we've talked about is you can't get caught up in comparing yourself with others. Like, you really do have to be true to yourself, and it's a lot easier said than done. And you really do have to be patient with yourself. I think a lot of the stuff is the stuff that I try to impart onto my daughters. Like, don't worry, like, be you, be weird, be happy being weird, and, just own who you are and what you do and what you're making, and just, stick with it. And you can change.
Yeah.
You can evolve. It's a good thing to evolve, but, don't get into like, oh, well, everyone's buying this, or they're only selling this, and this is what's popular on Instagram, and it's getting all the likes, because what you gonna do? Like, I can't talk today.
No, you're fine.
And what you're doing, like, that's you. Like, if you're a creator, like, you're putting a piece of yourself into it. So why would you want to do something that doesn't resonate with you?
Right. I think it's so true. I think of so many times that lesson has been right on point in my life. So I appreciate that. And hopefully all of our listeners and everyone watching, you can comment on that too if anyone wants. But this is great. Is there anything else that I've missed about your business that you just want to share with anyone, or where can they find you this weekend?
It's a smaller craft show. It's out in West Bloomfield, Michigan, called West Acres.
Okay.
So I'm going to be there. And then I'm also going to be at the Tiny Expo in Ann Arbor, Michigan on December 8th.
Awesome.
That's all I have confirmed right now, because I'm trying not to overcommit to anything. And then I have another new pattern I'm working on for Darn Good Yarn that should be out like in a couple weeks. And so that's it. Keep them busy.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll put all of your information, your Etsy store, all that good stuff up on our post as well, to share that along. And this was a lot of fun.
It was. Yeah, I'm so glad we got to sit down and talk.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to finish up here. And if anyone has any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us at info@darngoodyarn.com, or reach us on social media. Instagram is Darn Good Yarn, and Facebook is /DG Yarn. And you can just send us a direct message there, or a DM. But that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye.